Hi guys, how are you? And welcome to my channel. I'm Nicole and this is Crimes with Cole. So, hello. How are you guys doing today? I hope you all are having an amazing day. I hope you have had an amazing summer thus far and are ready for another crazy crime story. Today, we will be talking about the case of Becky Watts. Becky Watts was born Rebecca Marie Watts on June 3rd, 1998. She lived in Bristol with her father, Darren, and her stepmother, Angie. Now, Becky's biological mother, Tanya, had some personal difficulties after Becky was born, resulting in Becky living with her father and Angie full-time when she was just a baby. So Angie has been in Becky's life since she was 2 years old. And essentially, Angie was the mother figure for Becky. Now, Becky also had a brother that was 2 years older than her, and his name is Daniel. Now, when Daniel had gotten a little older, like in his teenage years, he decided that he wanted to go back and live with his mother, Tanya. She had gotten her ducks in a row, figured out what she needed to figure out, and Daniel decided that he wanted to go back and live with Tanya. However, Becky chose to stay with her father and Angie full time. Now, Angie came into the relationship with a son named Nathan that she had from a previous relationship. And when Angie and Darren had first gotten together, Nathan was about 12 years old. So he was significantly older than Becky and Daniel. Now, when Nathan was younger, he had lived with his grandma growing up due to some financial reasons that, Angie had been going through at that time. But once those financial reasons were resolved and, Angie was well off to take care of Nathan, he still chose to live with his grandma. However, he would come during the weekends to visit with his mother and Darren. Even though Nathan was only there on the weekends and occasionally maybe popped in during the week, Becky loved her big older stepbrother. She was just the type of little sister that just always wanted to be around him and always, hung out with him and just did whatever he was doing, even though there was such a big age gap. I mean, he's 14 years old and, she's, 2, 3, 4. So what she's interested in and what he's interested in are two totally different things. But Becky didn't care. She would follow him along and just try to do whatever he was doing. She loved her older stepbrother. In fact, when Becky was just 2 years old, her first clear word was Nathan. But Nathan did not share the same excitement and the same love and joy towards Becky. Nathan was very protective over his mother, and I think like most kids, especially at that age, like the 10, 11, 12-year-old mark, they come into this new family unit and they gain new step siblings. They have to start sharing their mother, and Nathan didn't want to share his mom. He didn't want his mom to have to take care of these two new step siblings, and Becky and Daniel were both very young. I mean, Becky was 2 when Angie came into her life, and Daniel was 4. So it's not like they could do things on their own. They had to have somebody taking care of them, cooking for them, cleaning for them, helping them do things. And I'm sure that really affected Nathan. And most of the time, you would think that kids would grow out of that would be the first initial feeling. But this feeling carried on with Nathan for years and years and years. Now, when Becky was 11 years old, she had become the prime target for bullying at school. She would come home from school crying every single day because the kids would make fun of her for being fat. And by no means was Becky fat. She was just your normal, your typical 11-year-old girl going through all the normal, typical physical changes that a preteen girl is going through at that time in life. It can just be a very awkward time in life, and because you're going through all these changes, mentally and physically, hormonally. A year or two later, you just kind of blossom into this teenager, and that's what Becky was going through, was just your typical preteen changes. But that didn't stop Becky's feelings from being hurt. And her dad and stepmom felt terrible about this. They wanted to do whatever they could to help their little girl. They wanted to ease this pain that she was coming home and expressing every single day. So they decided that they were going to buy her some stuff to help Becky with her dieting. She felt like if she could lose this fat that all these other kids claimed she had, that they would stop picking on her. But little did Becky know that that wasn't the case. That even after she had lost a tremendous amount of weight and became skinny, the kids at school still continued to bully her. And at just 12 years old, Becky was diagnosed with anorexia and almost hospitalized because she had gotten that thin. And Becky started skipping school because of the bullying, but also because she was just physically ill from the anorexia. There were some mornings where she could not pull herself out of bed to go to school physically. And to make matters worse, Becky didn't escape the bullying when she was at home because her stepbrother Nathan was there to bully her as well. And he would just, make comments to her about how she was still fat and needed to lose weight. And at this time, he's 23 years old. He's 23 and she's 12, and he's picking on her knowing damn well she has an eating disorder. But by the grace of God, that next year, Becky was physically recovered from her anorexia. She was still working on, the mental impact that it had taken on her. Now, when Becky was 15 years old, her stepmom, who had been with her since she was 2, right? That's essentially her mother figure. She lived with her full time, was diagnosed with MS, which is multiple sclerosis. And this was really hard on the family to have to sit back and watch Angie basically just kind of, wither away. And it was hard on them to watch their mother have to go through that. And on top of this, Becky had suffered from anxiety and depression as well. So you have, Becky dealing with her eating disorder, trying to mentally still recover from that. You have her anxiety, her depression. Now her stepmother has MS, which was just, it's a lot. There was a lot going on for Becky mentally. Becky's home life seemed to be pretty decent at this point. She got along with her dad and her stepmom with the occasional fight. I think that's pretty normal for any teenager and parents to have. But during one of these fights she had with her dad, he actually kicked her out, and she was forced to go stay with one of her friends. Now, Becky was a very shy girl. She didn't have like a huge circle of friends, just a handful that she felt comfortable and safe with. On Thursday, February 19th, 2015, Becky suddenly stopped responding to her friends' texts and messages. Her friends were worried, but quickly reasoned with the explanation that, maybe she was just busy, or her phone had died, or, she just, didn't want to talk. It had only been like a day or so, so they didn't think too much of it, just that, maybe she needed some me time. However, her family had not seen her since that Tuesday because, she had gone to her friend's house all day Wednesday and stayed at a friend's house Wednesday night. And then Thursday is when she just kind of quit responding to the messages. So she had left that Tuesday to go stay at her friend's house Tuesday night. She was there all day Wednesday. And then Thursday is when she quit responding to her friend's messages. And even though Angie was worried because Becky hadn't been responding to her phone calls or texts, she just kind of, did like most of us would do and justify it with the reason that, she's probably just staying at her friend's house again. Maybe she's mad. Maybe she doesn't want to talk to me. Maybe she's caught up in the moment. Maybe her phone died. There's a million reasons that we find to explain why people aren't responding to us. I mean, she's a teenage girl, and sometimes that's just how teenage girls are. But still, on Friday, February 20th, no one in Becky's family has seen her at this point. I mean, this is 3 days now that they haven't seen Becky. And she's also not responding to her friend's text still. So it's been 2 days that she hasn't been responding to her friend's text. She isn't posting on her social media accounts. And it's just starting to worry everybody because this is not like Becky. Becky is not the type that would just completely disappear. She wouldn't really just ghost people. So Becky's friends decide to go to her house to see what's wrong. Why are you not responding to us? And you can only imagine the feeling that Angie got answering the door to see all of Becky's close friends, because remember, she only had a handful of really close friends. Those were her best friends. And they're all standing outside the door. This entire time, Angie thought that Becky was with them. She thought that Becky had been staying at their house, maybe going in between two of them or whatnot. But she thought that she was with her friends this entire week. And they're like, well, we thought she was with you after she left our house, one of their houses on Wednesday night. So now everyone is really starting to worry because this just was very out of nature for Becky. I mean, she was a very timid girl. She didn't like going to new places alone or being in places without someone who she felt comfortable and safe and secure with. After Angie had called her father came home from work early because it's now Friday and no one has seen or heard from Becky since Tuesday. No one knows where she is, and this is just, again, way out of character for her. Something is wrong, so her friends went upstairs to see if maybe they could see if maybe she took some stuff, if there was some stuff missing, if maybe it looked like she had ran away, or, just anything was different with her stuff and her belongings. Her phone, tablet, and laptop were all gone, but none of her clothes or makeup was missing. She didn't tell any of her close friends anything about, what she was doing, or even gave a hint of if she was going to run away. So they decided to call the police on February 20th at 4 p.m. and report her missing. Now, at this point, she hasn't been seen by anyone in 48 hours, which it means the chances of finding Becky alive are very slim at this point. The police arrived at 6 p.m. to Becky's house. At this time, Nathan's girlfriend, Shauna, all of a sudden spoke up and said she knew something no one else did. She said she believed Becky was in the house on Thursday morning. She never saw her with her own eyes, but said she heard someone making noises in the house and believes that it had to have been Becky. She heard stomping down the stairs and then slamming the front door shut. And the police kind of, pushed it off because, she was a 16-year-old girl. She probably just got mad and ran away. But the family disagreed because this was not like Becky. The family had set up a social media account to spread awareness that she had gone missing. And overall, over 2 million people were alerted of this. And that night, Becky's dad had stayed up all night, calling Becky's cell phone and just waiting for a response, for an alert, for a message, for anything from someone saying that they had seen Becky or that they had heard from her or just anything after he had made this post. The two main theories so far are that she was either kidnapped or had ran away. So when the family went on TV to make an appearance, they would plead with Becky to come home just in case, she had ran away. But then they would also come on to plead with someone to let Becky come home in case she had been kidnapped. Searches were done in the surrounding area for Becky, but also for her stuff, because remember, her phone, laptop, and tablet were all missing. They searched a lot of houses in that area as well, just in case someone had been holding Becky hostage or in case they were hiding Becky and, she had ran away and just needed somewhere to hide. They had also searched the surrounding woods, lakes, and parks just in case as well. The police felt at this point that they should start interviewing the people that are closest to Becky to really kind of get an idea of who Becky was, because up until this point, they thought that she was just, a teenage runaway. But clearly they're starting to, run into dead ends. They particularly wanted to focus on Nathan and Shauna because, Shauna spoke up. They said that they were the last ones to claim they heard Becky. So they wanted to kind of particularly focus on them first. The officer questioning Shauna said she was very giggly and lighthearted despite the severity of what was happening. And it kind of made them question, why did she have a nervous laugh being questioned by the police? But I think that if you don't really encounter the police and you're not questioned by them, that naturally, maybe that's something sometimes people naturally do. They get a weird nervous laugh, so they kind of question, is this something she just kind of naturally does? Does she naturally get nervous all the time, or is she guilty and that's why she's got this nervous laugh? Now, when Nathan was being questioned, he came across very just relaxed and unbothered by the fact that Becky had been missing. 6 days after Becky's disappearance, Becky's dad and stepmom had been moved out of the house where they lived with, Becky, so that the house could be thoroughly searched by the forensic team. And wouldn't you know, they found red staining on the doorframe of Becky's bedroom alongside some fingerprints. It was very difficult to see with the naked eye, but there were 3 different heights that these fingertips were at. Some were very low, some were, waist high, and then some were up really high. So the police had brought Shauna and Nathan back in for questioning and asked Nathan about, his and Becky's relationship, and felt his answers were quite concerning. He made it very clear that he did not particularly like Becky because he felt she was just rude to his mother. The results came back from the forensic testing, and the fingerprints belonged to none other than Becky's stepbrother, Nathan. But who was the blood from? To test that, it was going to take a little bit longer, because if it was Becky's blood and Nathan's fingerprints, then we were going somewhere. But if it was Nathan's blood and Nathan's fingerprints, then, we were kind of going down a different path, because he could have just easily cut himself, had blood on his hands, grabbed the door frame, whatever. The results came back, and it turned out to be Becky's blood. So 10 days after Becky was last seen, the police tracked down Shauna and Nathan and arrested them both for kidnapping, because Becky's body has not yet been found. So for all they know, she's still alive somewhere. The police started to question Shauna and just felt like she was lying about something. So now that she's being questioned as a suspect and not a family member, per se, they started picking apart every little detail she gave them and just used a very straightforward method to just grill her with questions. As for Nathan, he wasn't like Shauna in that aspect, and he would just shut down if addressed with a straightforward questioning method. So they decided to kind of go search Nathan and Shauna's house, which was just a little bit over a mile from, Becky's house with her dad and stepmom. And when they entered into this home, it was cluttered. It looked like something that came off of the show Hoarders. There was nowhere to sit. There was nowhere to stand. Everything was just jam-packed with stuff. It was bad. It was so cluttered, they didn't even know that there was an upstairs bathroom. But when they finally did discover that there was an upstairs bathroom, they were shocked at what they had seen. They looked into the bathroom, and on the one side there was the sink and the toilet, right? And then on the other side was the bath shower. On the side that was the sink and the toilet, it was all packed. You could not even distinguish that there was a sink and a toilet there, because it was just all jam-packed with stuff. On the side of the shower and tub, it was so clean and decluttered. It looked like the tub had just been put in. That is how clean it was. It just seemed out of place, especially for this house. In the bathroom, they had found 2 receipts from a hardware-like store, both dated February 19th, which was the day that Becky had gone missing. And the receipts showed a circular saw, some gloves, some goggles, some face masks were all bought at this store. And when they went to the store to check the video surveillance from February 19th, they saw Nathan walking around the store, packing everything up into his buggy that was on that receipt. Both Shauna and Nathan were now rearrested for the murder, and Nathan had went and spoke with his lawyer, and at 10 p.m. he had returned with this long written statement. While his statement was being read out loud, he just put his fingers in his ears and plugged them up the entire time. And his statement read, "I, Nathan Charles Matthews, accept that I am responsible for the death of Rebecca Watts on the 19th of February, 2015. I attended Crown Hill St. George in Bristol with my girlfriend Shauna Hall. In my car, I had a large stun device, handcuffs, and a mask. I developed an idea to scare Rebecca by kidnapping her. I wanted to scare her and teach her a lesson. I believe that she was selfish and her behavior towards my mother was a risk to her health. A few minutes after arriving, Shauna said she wanted a cigarette and went outside into the garden. I went to the boot of my car, took out a bag that contained the items, and went upstairs to the London before knocking on Rebecca's door. She replied, "What?" or "Hello," and I said, "Can I see you a minute? I cannot be sure in which order things happened, but I used the items I had to subdue Rebecca. During the short struggle, my mask slipped. Rebecca was able to see my face. This caused me to panic, and I strangled her while she was partially in the bag." He then verbally went on to confess that he had dismembered Becky's body with the circular saw that he had bought, then wrapping each separate body part and putting them into like boxes and bags and suitcases and hiding them in the shed. Now, Becky's official cause of death was suffocation, and she had many defense wounds. The autopsy found that after her death, she had sustained 14 stab wounds and a lot more injuries. Her body was cut up into 8 different pieces, including decapitation. Now, Nathan later confessed, saying he had taped up Becky's eyes and mouth, punching her repeatedly in the head before she died. That just didn't line up with the story that he was going with in his written statement. So now the police are having to investigate his written statement. They wanted to make sure that the facts were true in the case and that it wasn't an accident gone wrong, but it was deliberate. That he had deliberately and had intentions the entire time to take Becky's life. Now, the entire time that Nathan had been confessing, he never once dragged Shauna into it. She was always outside smoking and she had no idea what was going on. But to go upstairs, strangle someone, and then dismember them into 8 pieces is going to take a whole lot longer than 1 or 2 cigarette smokes. So how did Shauna not know? After 2 whole months, police finally found something to tie Shauna into the involvement of Becky's death. The police had gone through this deleted content in both Shauna and Nathan's phones and found texts between the two that summed up and centered around the ideal of kidnapping schoolgirls and taking them home, holding them hostage, and using them as sex slaves. Kind of like the Ken and Barbie killer case, where Paul and Carla would do that, and it was the same concept. But these texts show that Shauna is clearly on the same page as Nathan and planning and kidnapping schoolgirls to take them home for their own pleasure. And when all of these texts were being analyzed, it was then that Shauna's DNA was found on one of the masks that was hidden in the shed where they had put, the boxes and the bins and the suitcases that contained Becky's body parts. So now they can tie Shauna into the death of Becky. Now, after the trial had started, it came out just how fixated Nathan had truly became with younger girls. Even when he was younger, at like the age of 21, he was still picking up and hanging around these 14-year-old girls. I mean, that's a bit of an age gap, in my opinion. It also came out how Nathan had these desires, if you want to call them that, where he was into the dom and the sub type of sexual relationship, which is fine if you're into that, and Shauna would come out and say that sometimes Nathan was a bit forceful, but Nathan would contradict that statement by saying that, Shauna liked it. So a lot of the information started coming out during the trial, almost making the parents question if the reason Becky felt so uncomfortable and unsafe around Nathan was because he had maybe tried to make a move on her, or, he was just aggressive to her. I don't know. No one ever really found out. No one really knows why Becky had always felt uncomfortable. I personally think that he probably showed her some sort of behavior that would exhibit aggression. It never really came out the reason why. The trial went on for about 5 weeks. And on November 11th, 2015, the jury came back after 3.5 hours and found Nathan guilty and found Shauna not guilty of murder, but guilty of manslaughter. Nathan was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 33 years, and Shauna was sentenced to 17 years in prison. How wild is that? But before I go, I must ask, do you think Nathan intentionally meant to kill his stepsister? Or do you think that his story of how he truly wanted to scare her and kidnap her just went wrong? Do you think that Shauna had more to do with it than just the involvement that they claimed she did? Do you think that maybe she was helping with the dismemberment? Or do you think maybe she was just grabbing the suitcases and the boxes and the bins because Nathan said to grab them and take them out back to the shed? You'll have to let me know. And until next time, please remember to be safe, and I will see you then. Bye.